All right. Hello, hello. Welcome back to another episode of the SEO Growth Podcast. Once again, not talking about SEO today, but still talking about content and marketing. And today I'm with Sam Morris from Payzaar, and we are going to be talking about when you're not marketing to marketers, which is the case for a lot of us, how SaaS marketers can use video content to learn about their market. So this is really interesting because we all really desperately want to learn about our markets and talk to our customers. And it's not really that easy when it's people who aren't super active on LinkedIn all the time and aren't putting themselves out there online. So Sam, how's it going?
Good. Happy to be talking about this. It's an interesting topic. It's something we've been struggling with a lot, and we've been working on this for quite a while. And I think we have kind of cracked the code a little bit, but yeah.
Okay, well, I'm excited to hear how you crack the code because everybody wants to know that. It is really hard to is there some people marketing to very particular civil engineers in a specific state or something. So that's a whole other thing. But with Payzaar, you are marketing to payroll, HR managers?
Yes. Yeah. Payroll people specifically. Payroll sits typically within HR in most companies, but in some companies it's under finance. And within payroll, we're marketing to the global payroll function, which is even more niche, I would say.
Oh, really?
So, yeah.
It sounds like it's less niche.
It is. It's more, so it's more niche because a payroll person would be someone who just manages payroll, and that could be national payroll. And it's typically, I guess it's a role that is closer to accounting in a way. Whereas global payroll is someone who is charged with overseeing compliance and governance and processes and workflows of a multinational company's payroll on an international level. So it's very specific.
So are they very different from the regular? So like a payroll person who sits under finance, or a payroll person who sits under HR, or global payroll person, are they very different from one another in terms of their pain points day to day?
I think that, typically the career trajectory that they have is people will go into payroll and they'll work in national or international payroll, and they'll be a practitioner. So they'll be the person who's in charge of calculating and actually running the payroll process every month, because it's a cyclical thing that they do over and over again. And then as they progress upwards, as they move into kind of like a management role where they're leading a payroll team, they could either lead that at a national level, or they could move into global payroll, which is I'm managing that for a multinational company. And instead of just managing one country, I'm managing all those processes and all those systems and everything in 10, 20, 30, 40 different countries sometimes.
Intense. Okay, so what's the deal? How do you, before we get into the video content thing, let's talk about where do these people live online?
So we find that a lot of them are on LinkedIn, but because LinkedIn is where everyone is basically right now. But I think there's also an age profile thing there. People especially in the more leadership positions, they tend to be a little bit older. We're not talking about someone who's 25 to 35. We're talking about 35 and up, or 40 and up in a lot of cases. It's a very female-dominated profession. So I think something like 65 to 70% of people who work in the field are women. And so mostly LinkedIn, some Facebook also, I guess because of the age and gender element of it. And those are kind of the two channels that we found. But then there's a lot of people who we've talked to, and we say, hey, so where are you online? Where do you procrastinate when you're online? And they say, oh, no, I don't do that. Or no, I don't really use social media and stuff like that.
Well, that's annoying.
Yeah. Well, it's okay. It's one of the hurdles.
Yeah, it happens a lot. How do you go about learning about their pain points and how to speak to them? I mean, I guess you probably have a payroll people on your team, but other than talking to them.
So this is the interesting thing. If we had a payroll person on our team, so we're a very small company, we're very young. We have that outsourced. We work with a provider just because we're such a young company. But the people that we could have on our team would not be the same as the people we want to talk to, because we only sell to the enterprise. We only sell to large multinational companies. So we're talking about companies that have at the very least 1,000 employees up to 25,000 more sometimes. So the payroll person that would work for me in my company, or not for me, but work at my company, would have a radically different experience
Yeah.
than the person we're trying to sell to. And this is kind of like one of my pet peeves with marketing and marketing content, which is that you'll see all these cool case studies and people saying, "Oh, I did this cool thing, or I did this campaign, and it brought me so many leads and so many opportunities." And the example is always MarTech or sales tech, always.
Yeah.
Occasionally there'll be something else, right? And on the one hand, yeah, there's like, I don't know, was it like 5 or 10K SaaS companies nowadays, and probably most of those are MarTech or sales tech companies. So you're dealing with a lot of competition, but at the same time, it's kind of like you're working on easy mode because you're selling to yourself. In our case, it's not like that. We're selling to this super, super niche market. And I don't have the luxury of having anyone in my team I can talk
Okay.
to learn what their priorities are, what their pains are, what their day to day is like. So we have to figure that out in other ways. And the way we've done that is by involving our prospects, our audience, in content co-creation, right? And within that, the type of content we focus on the most is on video. So we've started a global payroll themed talk show, which is a video first podcast. It lives on YouTube and on LinkedIn. And then we cross publish to some other channels, but those are like the two places where it's most present. And what we do is we try to find people, global payroll leaders, people who we would actually want to sell to, who have global payroll leadership roles at companies that fit our ICP, that are on one of the lists that we're targeting, and we invite them on the show. We interview them about stuff, topics that are relevant to global payroll leaders, as a way to, one, build a relationship with them, and to learn about our market through them, basically.
Is it hard to get them onto the show? What's the success rate of inviting them to getting them on?
I can't give you a percentage number right now, but I would say like an exact number, but it's less than 50%. And
Okay.
this is like one of the particularities of our sector. So payroll is cyclical. They do the same thing over and over again, month after month. They have a very, very tight calendar that they work with. There's obviously some variation from one month to the next. Certain things change. But it's very typical for people to work a lot of overtime, to work weekends, to work nights and stuff like that. So it's not just that we're selling to a segment that is very alien to us as marketers. We're selling to a segment that is inherently unavailable. They have very little time to focus on things that are not their job, basically. So that makes it a little bit difficult. But yeah, I'd say less than 50% success rate. So we have to do quite a bit of outreach and quite a lot, speak to a lot of people to get someone to participate.
What do you say to them? It's like, oh, you're such a brilliant payroll person, because they're probably not posting that much content either. So like, how do you connect with them and say, I want to talk to you?
Now I think it's gotten a little bit easier now because we've been doing this for a year. So some people will recognize us and they'll say, oh yeah,
Okay.
I've heard about you, or I've seen your show, or even if they haven't listened to it, they know it exists and they know who we are. So that kind of creates a little bit more positive predisposition. But basically it's just very honest and very transparent outreach. And we'll just say, hey, we're doing this show. Here you can see some of the episodes we've done in the past, and we'd love to have you on because we think, you could talk about some interesting things. And we'll usually have some topics in mind and stuff like that.
Okay.
And we will discuss with them and agree on how we want to structure the discussion, what they'll feel comfortable talking about, et cetera, et cetera. Very, very normal, I would say.
Clean and simple. So what kind of video content is this? Because I know you're doing live, you're doing webinars.
Yeah.
You're doing regular video podcasts,
Yeah.
video first podcasts, you called it.
Yeah, exactly.
What's the breakdown of that? And do these ICPs come on all of them?
Yeah. So, so our whole thing when we started is we want to focus on video, just because there's already so much written content out there, and because we did a little bit of analysis of our sector, and we realized that our competitors were not doing a lot of video stuff. So we said, hey, we want to set ourselves apart by being the company that focuses the most on this right from the get-go. So we have our talk show. We do a couple episodes of that every month. We do a webinar every month, which is live. We refer to them as digital events because it's webinars, but a lot of them are not typical webinar format. A lot of them are kind of like panel discussions and stuff like that. And then we do live demo sessions also where we demo our platform. So we're producing 3 to 5 different pieces of original video content every month, which we can then repurpose across lots of different channels.
Mm-hmm.
And aside from the live demo sessions, which are led by product, we try to involve people from our ICPs, from our market, in all of these. So
Okay.
obviously for the talk show, because we're interviewing people, but in our webinars we try to do that too. Whether it's bringing on some of our existing clients, or we will go out there and we'll say, hey, look, we're doing a digital event where we want to have a panel discussion on this specific topic. Would you like to join and participate in that?
Yeah.
And
Well,
and it's
what's
just trying to get people involved as much as possible.
definitely what's the benefit for you to bring existing clients on, just to nurture that relationship?
That's one. Yeah, that's part of it. Obviously, it gives you a lot of credibility. If
Yeah.
if you're hearing me say how good I am at something or how I solve a problem, as one of our potential prospects, then that has less credibility than if you're hearing it from one of your peers.
Yeah.
So if I can bring on one of our customers and we can talk about process automation and how you can save time on, a lot of these kind of very manual tasks that you're having to do over and over again. But instead of me saying it and you having to take me at my word, you hear someone who is a global payroll leader like you saying it, obviously
It holds a
that
little
helps
bit
a lot.
more.
Yeah.
Okay, so I think that last time we spoke, you said you have a list of accounts that you want to target, and there's
Mm-hmm.
hundreds of them on there, but you're
Mm-hmm.
only publishing 3 to 5 episodes a month.
In
How do you
total
select?
yeah. So I think it depends on the topic that we want to cover. So for example, if we want to do an episode or we want to do an interview where we're going to talk about, I'm just making this up now. Let's say we want to talk about the intersection of payroll and fintech, for example. Well, on my account list, there's going to be a bunch of fintech companies. I'm going to try to prioritize those first, and then the availability of, or the lack of availability of a lot of payroll people is what's going to be to determine in the end. I'm going to outreach to lots of them at the same time. If I get multiple positive responses, then maybe what I'll do is I'll say, hey, maybe we can invite 2 or 3 of you on, and we can do a digital
Yeah.
event. We can have a panel discussion on this. If we only get one person, then that's the person we go with, basically. So availability kind of limits it a little bit. Where I'd like to get to in the future eventually is to a state where everyone knows who we are and everyone knows the show and everyone is excited to come on. So we can say, hey, we'd like to bring you on for this, and they'll say, oh yeah, and they'll jump at that opportunity.
Yes.
But we're not
Thanks for
quite
asking
there
me.
yet.
Yeah. So how do you find, because there's a difference between creating good content that's for an audience and they're going to engage, and then also using that. So starting the relationship, I see that, but then you also are using it to learn about the market and learn about them, but you have to come to that episode prepared already, with your questions, and kind of, you have to seem knowledgeable too. How do you manage using that time to both create good content and learn about their day-to-day pain points?
So we do a lot of research in advance. And research means that we will actually engage with the people we're talking to before we have them on the show. So we will come up with a script. We will come up with an idea of what we want the content to look like and what topics we want to cover in any specific piece of content with them. We will decide on what topics we want to cover based on what we're trying to learn from the market. So if we want to learn more about a specific subject so we can later incorporate that into our marketing and into our messaging, then we're going to do digital, we're going to do video content that focuses on that thing specifically. So that happens beforehand. And then there's the research process where we engage with the people we're talking to, and we will get their input and we'll get their feedback. And then now, since we've been doing this for a little bit of time, we do have, a base level of knowledge of the market that does allow us to kind of say, oh, this is interesting. We can talk about this in this way. We can cover this topic and we can focus on this specific angle because it's something that has popped up before in the content we've been doing. So we do have a certain level of expertise that has been building up over time, and that informs the content that we're doing, that we're doing now. And the idea is it'll just keep scaling up over time.
Okay. Nice. So now that you started this relationship, for example, you say, come on my podcast. We got this other great guest on here that you could do panel talk with, whatever. How are you just waiting for that person to be like, oh, actually your software looks pretty interesting to me? Or are you introducing them to somebody else? Or what's the next step?
So that happens naturally in a lot of cases. I think if you are a leader, if you're a manager, you're head of a department, you're in a leadership position, you're receiving dozens of cold outreach emails every month, and you're just deleting almost all of them because it's garbage and you don't know who they are and you're not interested and you're busy. Um, if you've had a 1 hour long conversation with our CEO, because he's the one who hosts the show, and you know him and you have a positive predisposition towards him, um, that means that you're just going to be much more positively predisposed to us, into our solution,
Yeah.
and to having a potential sales conversation with us. And what we find is that a lot of cases it just happens naturally. So we'll have someone on the show, the recording, we record, it takes an hour between setup and pre-chat and all that kind of stuff. And at the end, a lot of people will say, "Oh, and by the way, I know about what you're doing. I'd like to learn a little bit more. When can we set up a call and talk about that?"
Okay.
Yeah, so that happens very naturally in a lot of cases. In some cases, we will push for it a little bit, but generally the conversion rate we have on that is very, very high. Like once someone has been on one of our on one of our webinars, on the talk show or something like that, the conversion rate into a sales call and then into an opportunity is significantly higher than what you would get in any other channel.
Yeah. I can imagine because they've already talked to you. You didn't ask for anything except for their
Yeah,
expertise. It shows
yeah,
that you know what they're talking about, shows that you care
yeah,
about the industry and what you're doing. So
yeah.
it sounds like a really good deal. What happens if they don't ask?
We'll push for it a little bit.
Yeah.
We'll give them a little nudge. We'll give them a little nudge and say, "Hey, and by the way, instead of saying, 'Hey, I would like to sell to you something,' I will say, 'Hey, I would like to learn a little bit more about how you are managing your global payroll at company
Yeah.
name. I'm very curious about that.'" And you give them a little nudge, and generally they'll also say yes to that.
Nice. Um, cool. So since you've been doing this, you said you've been doing this for a year?
Yeah, we
What
started we started in exactly a year ago right now.
what's been your biggest wins and lessons from this?
Biggest win, I would say, we've generated 6 figures worth of pipeline opportunities from all these different, video content, digital events, podcast things that we've been doing in our pipeline right now.
That's a
And some of
huge
the
win.
accounts that we've generated, some of the accounts that we're engaged with currently that come from this are very big, very juicy, very interesting accounts.
Good. That's
So yeah,
amazing.
that would for sure be the number one.
What about the biggest lesson?
Um, I think the biggest lesson in this context would be that it pays to be very nice and to be very friendly to people and to be natural and to not try to sell to them,
Yeah.
basically. If you try to engage people, I think ever since the pandemic, all digital channels are hypersaturated because everything became digital all of a sudden. So all field and trade and all that kind of stuff just disappeared. Especially if you're selling into the enterprise, I think field and offline stuff was more important than if you were selling to SMEs, for example.
Hmm.
Um, and since that disappeared overnight, all these digital channels became hypersaturated. Everyone is like bombarded with sales messaging all the time, with pitches and stuff like that. I think it really pays to not be salesy, to not engage people in
Yeah.
that way of like, "Hey, I want to pitch to you. I'm sending you a cold email. Do you have time for a call?" That will work sometimes, but the conversion rate is much lower. And I think it's much better to engage with people in a way where you're kind of flattering them a little bit. You're massaging
Yeah.
their ego by looking for their expertise and stuff like that, and letting that naturally evolve into a sales discussion afterwards.
Yeah. Great. Well, this episode was initially about how to learn about the market. It turned into how to do lead gen with video content, but it's all part of the whole thing. Like you're still meeting
Yeah,
people, you're building relationships. It just happens to do lead gen as well naturally. And
yeah,
you can use it
exactly.
to learn more about the market. When I first started this podcast as well, a big part of it was just trying to learn like from people who had more experience than me.
Hmm.
Um, and I learned a lot, and it was very helpful for doing that
Hmm.
because you basically have a free session with somebody. And you can ask them anything you want. So it is a great channel for doing those kind of things, learning about your market. So
Yeah, for sure.
thanks for joining me today, Sam. This has been
Thank
a
you.
really great
Thank you
chat.
for the opportunity. I
Yeah.
found it very interesting also.
Yeah, I love this topic, really. Just always trying to find creative ways to get a hold of the customer and get inside of their heads, just
Yeah.
learning what's going on with them.
Mm-hmm.
Where's the best place for people to connect with you if they want to?
You can find me on LinkedIn. You could look up Sam. If you look up Sam Morris, I don't know. I don't think there's that many of us out there, so you'll probably find me. Although I'm not very active on social media, actually.
Okay.
I stay away from social when I'm not working. So you
Yeah.
can add me on LinkedIn and we can talk and stuff like that. But I'm not. I don't post very much.
All right. Well, it's been a pleasure. If you enjoyed this episode, give it a like, share it with somebody, let us know that you listened or watched it. And thank you so much for your time, Sam. See you
Thank
next
you.
time.
Take care. Bye-bye.